I have often laughed at the weakening who thought themselves good because they have no claws. How can our own mind deceive us and lead us away from what we have planned? Imagine that you decide to lead a healthier life with well-defined goals such as exercising frequently and eating better. At first, you're full of energy and desire, but suddenly you start putting off your workouts. You tell yourself you're going to start next Monday, but when that day arrives, it seems that tiredness or laziness appear out of nowhere and you give up. This is an example of how we often create clear goals and make detailed plans, but end up acting in ways that take us further away from what we want. We make decisions that don't make sense, face unexpected roadblocks, and sometimes even experience things like headaches or tiredness that prevent us from moving forward. This feeling of sabotaging ourselves can be very frustrating and leaves us confused as to why we never manage to achieve what we want so much. But why does this happen? Why does it seem that sometimes we are our own enemies without realizing it? Carl Jung, a famous Swiss psychiatrist, spent a lot of time studying the human mind and made some very interesting discoveries about this kind of situation. He explained that inside us, there is something he called the shadow. The shadow is like a hidden place inside our mind where we put the parts of ourselves that we don't like or that we think others won't accept. This can happen for various reasons. Perhaps our parents didn't like certain things about us, or perhaps these characteristics are not well regarded by society. We may even have learned that these parts of us cause pain or problems, so we end up hiding these traits in the back of our minds, as if they were no longer part of who we are. But, as Jung explained, pushing these parts away doesn't solve the problem. On the contrary, they can start acting on their own, in ways we can't control. This is when self-sabotage happens. These hidden parts rebel against what we want, and we are left in conflict with ourselves, without really understanding what is going on. Jung gives us a solution for dealing with the shadow. Instead of hiding these parts of us, he suggests that we should bring them into the light by recognizing them and integrating them into our consciousness. This means that we need to look at what is hidden within us and make it visible and understandable. As Jung wrote in Psychological Types, our consciousness is easily influenced by what is in the unconscious, which can often be truer and wiser than what we consciously think. Many people mistake the shadow for something purely bad or negative. Since it can cause us difficulties, it's common to think that the shadow is where all our bad impulses lie. For this reason, it is often represented as a dark and frightening figure, as if it were a dangerous other self that acts without us realizing it. But the shadow is much more than that. It's like a dark closet inside our mind, where we keep parts of our personality that we're not ready to accept or deal with at the moment. This can happen because of trauma, unmet needs, or other reasons. When we talk about working with the shadow, it doesn't mean accepting the whole shadow, but rather the parts of our personality that are hidden in it. Just as we can take objects out of a dark cupboard and put them into the light, we can also bring these hidden parts of ourselves into our awareness. This stops them causing us problems, so these parts are not bad in themselves. The problem is that when they are hidden and out of our control, they can get in our way. It's important to understand that these hidden parts aren't just isolated traits. As Jung explained, unconscious motives often have more influence over our decisions than conscious thoughts, especially in important matters. These hidden parts of the personality, called shadow aspects, are like little pieces of who we are. Each of these pieces is part of our identity, even if we don't recognize them at the time. When these mini-personalities are separated from our consciousness and kept in the shadows, they start to act on their own without us being able to control them. They become independent of our conscious self, which is the ego, the part of us that we perceive as myself. Just as the ego has its own wants, needs, and goals, these shadow aspects also have their own. And sometimes these goals conflict with what our ego wants. This can leave us confused and struggling internally without realizing what is really going on. When we can recognize and accept these hidden parts of ourselves, we can begin to free ourselves from self-sabotage and live with more clarity and purpose. This journey is very important for anyone who wants to know themselves better and grow as a person. Often, when the desires of our conscious mind clash with the desires of hidden shadow parts, we feel a great deal of internal confusion. This confusion can manifest as resistance, tiredness, or even behaviors such as procrastination, which end up preventing us from making positive changes in our lives. Let's think of an example to understand how this can happen. Imagine a man who believes he is a very lonely person. He dreams of having a successful online business and living in the countryside, away from people, because he thinks this independent life is exactly what he wants. Although this plan seems possible, he begins to act in ways that sabotage his progress. For example, someone offers him a cheap plot of land in a remote location, perfect for his idea, but he turns it down for no clear reason. Or he creates a blog about this lifestyle and attracts many followers, with a high chance of success, but suddenly stops publishing and can't explain why. To the ego, the conscious part of his mind, these actions make no sense. He believes he wants to be independent and live alone, and this is something he has planned for a long time. But when these dreams start to come true, he himself puts barriers in the way and doesn't understand why. It seems that there is an invisible force sabotaging his efforts. This force may be a repressed aspect of his mind, a part of the shadow that acts on its own. Perhaps deep down, he's afraid of being completely alone or wants, without realizing it, the approval and contact of other people. Even though his conscious part dreams of total independence, this hidden part fears complete isolation and acts to prevent this from happening, disrupting his plans without him realizing it. Men keep moving away from their dreams, always finding reasons that seem logical to postpone or change their plans. But as long as he doesn't face and accept this hidden part of himself, the fear of being alone or the desire to be connected with other people, he will be trapped in a cycle of self-sabotage. It's as if there were an unwanted visitor hiding inside him, acting in the shadows without him realizing it. This visitor makes decisions he doesn't understand and prevents him from achieving his goals even when they are within reach. He senses that something is wrong, but he can't find out what it is because it's outside his consciousness. And as long as he doesn't bring that part to light, it will remain in control, as if it were a hidden puppeteer, pulling the strings of his actions. Dr. Murray Stein, a scholar of Jung's psychology, explained, "Any part of our mind that acts on its own, without being under the control of our conscious will, can end up dominating us to the same extent that it is powerful, limiting our freedom." When these hidden parts take over, difficult consequences can arise. Emotions and desires that make no sense appear suddenly, without warning, and take the place of what we really want. They can weaken our willpower and interfere with our plans as if they were manipulating the strings behind a curtain, leaving us confused about our own actions. Dr. Stein also explained that these repressed parts, called complexes by Jung, often block our personal growth, pushing us down difficult paths. He gave examples. Someone can get stuck in intense feelings of anger, or a desire for revenge for things that happened in childhood, or they can get lost in sad memories from the past. These hidden parts have a will of their own, which is sometimes stronger than the ability of our ego, the conscious part of ourselves, to resist. In the case of a man, the complex hidden in his shadow is his desire to be with other people. Because of past wounds, he has hidden this part of himself and doesn't even realize that it still exists. Now, this rejected desire acts as a shadow government, hindering his actions. Although he thinks he loves solitude and independence, in the back of his mind he longs for company. This unconscious desire conflicts with his plans and causes him to sabotage himself without realizing what is really happening. This hidden part of the personality acts in a curious and even contradictory way. On the one hand, it wants to be recognized by its conscience. It wants its intentions to be noticed, its desires to be understood, and its needs to be met. For this reason, it hinders the efforts of the conscious part that seeks independence at all costs, sabotaging its plans. But at the same time, this dark part doesn't want to be discovered. It prefers to stay hidden because it also feels angry at having been rejected. If it is brought to light, it will lose its control and autonomy. As long as it remains in the shadows, it can continue to sabotage and create problems independently. Understanding and accepting these hidden parts is very important for overcoming self-sabotage. As Jung wrote in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, knowing yourself more deeply is the first step to ending these cycles of self-sabotage and achieving true personal growth. When we recognize these dark parts, we can finally work with them instead of fighting against them.